So yes, I did my makeup to match the cover of this book, because like, why not? This book gave me a reason to finally do rainbow colored eyeshadow, and I'm like all for it right now. Hey guys, it's Maddie, and today I'll be doing a book review on Warcross by Marie Lu. Before I begin, I am so sorry if the white balance is like really bad, but this book is super white, and I think I have a setting on my camera where the white balance is really off. I don't know how to fix it, so just bear with me. I think it might actually help if we set the book like on the bookshelf. Yeah. Now the screen looks better. Okay, so moving on to the summary of this book. So Warcross follows a girl named Amika who is a bounty hunter. And in her world, this virtual reality game called Warcross exists, and it has been around for 10 years and it has become extremely popular. So it's the opening ceremony of Warcross, and Amika makes a plan to get into the game and steal an artifact, a power-up from the game, since if she gets this power-up she can sell it, and since she's in really bad debt with her landowner because she's behind on rent and she can't afford it, she's desperate for money, so she tries to get this power-up, but instead she accidentally ends up putting herself into the game and everyone sees her, so she realizes she is in big trouble now, and she expects that she's gonna like go to jail because of this, but instead she gets a phone call from Warcross's creator named Hideo, and he asks her to come to Tokyo, and he hires her to track down a hacker who is trying to mess up the game of Warcross. So moving on to the plot, before I move on exactly, I just want to say I love this book so much, so everything I'm going to say is going to be such great things about it. I specifically love the plot. I'm not a video game player myself, but I still love the world that Warcross takes place in. The concept of Warcross, the game itself, is very fascinating. Basically, the game is just like capture the flag. Two teams are trying to take the opposing team's artifact, and the team that takes the other team's artifact will win the game. The game was so vividly detailed, and I really loved that. I could easily picture the Warcross game itself, and I was really invested in this story and this concept from page 1. And I think that has to do with Marie Lu's ability to easily describe settings in such a vivid way to where I could picture it so well, and I could picture everything that was going on so well. And I was kept on the edge of my seat numerous times throughout this book, especially when it came to the Warcross game itself and the players playing it, because it was very action-packed and very suspenseful because I didn't know what was going to happen. And as for the setting of the book, I loved it so much. In the first few chapters, it takes place in New York City. But then Amika goes to Tokyo, so it takes place in Japan. I am so fascinated by Japanese culture because I watch a lot of anime. So because I watch a lot of anime, I've always been very interested in Japan and the Japanese culture. So the moment I found out that this book was taking place in Japan, I was sold. I knew I was going to love this book just because of the setting. And I think this book really represented Japanese culture well. It actually doesn't go much into the Japanese culture itself. It's just that it takes place in Japan. But you could definitely see some Japanese elements that were intertwined into the story, and I really enjoyed that since I love Japan so much. I want to go there so bad. And reading this book, since it takes place in Tokyo, made me want to go to Japan even more just to experience it. I was just in love with the setting of this book. The characters were great. First we have Amika, who is the main character. She is a very brave character because she has a job as a bounty hunter and she has to hunt down criminals. I for one couldn't do that. I'm not brave enough to do that, but she was very, very brave to do that. The rest of her courage shows throughout the book as she is trying to hunt down this hacker who is trying to get into the Warcross game, and he's even more dangerous than any criminal she has literally ever tried to track down. So the rest of her bravery really shows throughout the book, and I really love that about her. I also loved how diverse she was. She is Chinese American, which is a plus. I'm always all for diverse main characters in books, and I also love the fact that she has rainbow colored hair, and I kind of pictured her hair as like green and red and yellow and blue and violet, all the colors of the rainbow just mixed into her hair, and I just thought that was so cool. And she also has a full arm of just tattoos, so I really loved visualizing her. She was very fun to picture in my head, and I love the fact that she really wasn't your average main character. appearance-wise, she was very different. She comes from a different ethnicity, and I just really loved that, and it really made her stand out above any main character I've ever read about. And next, I want to talk about Hideo. So the funny thing with Hideo, I was pronouncing his name Hido throughout the whole book, and I was so convinced I was right. So whenever I was like watching reviews on Warcross, I was like, y'all are pronouncing his name wrong. It is Hido. I am right. I know I'm right. And then I was just recently watching Marie Lu's book talk with Pulling Bananas Books on her channel, and Marie Lu was pronouncing his name as Hideo. So like, y'all were right. I'm sorry. I'm the one who was wrong. But I was so convinced I was right that his name was Hido. Like, now I just feel stupid. But his name is actually Hideo. And going on with his character, I really loved him. It's amazing that he's only 21 and he's already a billionaire and the creator of such a successful virtual reality video game. In a way, it's kind of unrealistic that someone so young could be this successful in a way that they made like the biggest video game of all time. But it is still very, very cool. Comes off as reserved and stoic and has a hard time opening up to most people. He only has a small group of people that he actually confides in, and eventually Amika becomes one of those people since she is working for him. So I really like the fact that Hideo was able to open up to Amika more eventually. And I think one reason why I was so drawn and interested into this character was his backstory. It is very sad, very heartbreaking, and I'm a sucker for those very sad backstories. So even though he came across as very basic and not totally interesting, the only interesting fact about him is that he made this video game. But his personality itself isn't so intriguing, but his backstory was very heartbreaking, and it's what really made me really fall in love with this character even more. A romance is something I wouldn't have ever expected to come out of this book, but there is one. And the character's relationship development was developed so well, so I was all for it. And it wasn't necessary, but it was a nice addition to the story. It really showed these two characters growing more closer together, and I really enjoyed seeing that. And it, of course, was set in the background of everything else. This is mainly a sci-fi book, but it was still nice to see those romance elements in there, since I, for one, have mentioned a lot, I'm a fan of romance, so I really enjoyed seeing that, even if it was in the background. Although after what's happened in the end of this book, I'm really curious to see how the relationship is going to be dealt with in the sequel, since something happened in the last book that kind of rocked the romance aspect of this a bit. So I'm really wondering how the romance and relationship is going to be handled in the sequel, because something about it went really wrong. As I mentioned a little earlier, I loved Marie Lu's writing. This is the first book I've ever read from her, which really still surprises me because she's such a well-known YA author. And because I love Warcross and I love the writing, I'm definitely going to have to check out more of Marie Lu's other books. She has 2 series out that I know of. One of them is the Legend trilogy and then the Young Elites. 2 books I've been meaning to read for a while now. So now that I've read Warcross and I ended up loving this book, I'm definitely going to check out her other books because her writing was so good. Like I said, she's able to really describe settings especially so well. So I'm just really looking forward to reading her other books. There are a few kind of spoiler things I want to go into, since there are things that happen at the end of this book that really left me completely shook. So I do want to talk about those, but before I start, for those of you who have not read this book yet, please read it. My overall thoughts on it, I give it a 5 out of 5 stars. Highly would recommend it. I know it is super hyped up, and it's been hyped up since it came out, but I promise you it is totally worth the hype, and I would highly recommend to check it out as soon as you can. If you have not read this book yet, please leave now so I don't spoil you. And after you've read this book, if you want to come back and hear my discussion on it of major things that happen in this book, then you are welcome to come back. But for now, bye non-spoiler people, and I hope you check out this book. For spoilers, there are 2 things that I want to discuss that happened. So I knew the entire time that Hideo was up to something that wasn't good, because Zero had to have a reason for trying to assassinate him and stop him. And I just knew the entire time that Hideo was doing something wrong, and I was completely heartbroken when I found out that I was right. And I grew to love this character throughout the whole book, but his plans were just so wrong. You can tell he's kind of acting like a dictator, since he wants to control people and their thoughts, even though he's doing this for good reason, to prevent crime from happening. You can just tell that this power is just going to progress to something really, really bad, because it's just too much power for one person to have. And like I said, I know it comes from good intentions, because he was inspired to do this because of what happened to his brother since he was kidnapped, and he wants to stop crime. It just, you know, it's not going to turn out good in the end. So I'm just really heartbroken that my suspicions were actually true, and I wish it wouldn't have happened. But even so, I still love Hideo as a character, and I can't wait to see if he will redeem himself in the sequel. One thing I wasn't suspecting, though, was for Sasuke, Hideo's brother, to be Zero. When I found that out, I was literally shaken so bad. Like, my jaw dropped, literally. Like, I had my jaw dropped for like a full minute because I was in so much shock. I did not see that coming, and then when I found that out, I was like, I should have saw that coming. Like, of course it's gonna be his long lost brother. Like, what? Why didn't I think of that? That was like a huge plot twist that I really didn't see coming, and it really makes me curious to see how Sasuke is going to be in the second book. And I can kind of tell now that Amika wants to kind of team up with him, because Sasuke wants to stop Hideo from doing what he's doing with controlling people through the Neuralink. And I also can't wait for Hideo to find out that Sasuke was Zero all along. Like, I'm sure that's gonna really, really shock him. And what really is so insane about this whole thing is that Hideo made this controlling of people's minds with the Neuralink because he wants to stop crime, and that desire to stop crime came from him wanting to do this from his brother, because his brother was kidnapped, and he kept saying throughout the whole book, everything I do is for my brother. So he made this whole plan because of his brother, to like bring justice for him, but his brother is trying to stop him from doing this. So the person who Hideo is doing this for disagrees completely that he's doing it and is trying to stop him. I just think that is just such a fascinating twist right there. And I really, really can't wait to see how it'll go down in the sequel. It's just, the way this book left off was just on such an exciting note that really, really made me want to pick up the sequel, even though it's not out yet. And I can't wait to see what happens in it because of these plot twists. So that was my discussion right there. As you can tell, I was left so shaken by the end of this book. And I know a lot of exciting things are probably going to go down in the sequel that I'm just really excited for. Thank you guys so much for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed.